Hey, powerful creators. Welcome to the season 4 premiere of Doing the Math with Dr. Wesley Muhammad. That's right, we're in season 4. I'm your host, Janita Harris, and of course, I'm with no other than Dr. Wesley Muhammad himself, who sits on the Executive Council in the Nation of Islam, and he's also on the Research Committee. Can you believe that we're in season 4?
God is good.
I know!
It's been a beautiful journey. I've grown. I've enjoyed watching your growth and the growth of the show. So, Allah is God.
Well, speaking of growth of the show, for all of our audience members at home, if you look around, you can see, hey, it's lit in here right now. It is a blessing, and it is so amazing. I remember where at one point we had no one other than our live stream, and now we have food. There are doctors here. There are community leaders.
Shout out to Foodie Spot.
Right, we got Foodie Spot. We have entrepreneurs in here. I mean, the Black community is just so wide and vast. It's humbling to be able to share this moment with everybody. So
It's a beautiful thing.
I know. I wore my dream earrings, and my dream came true. So I'm super excited about that. So much is going on in the world. For instance, I know the World Health Organization was really hesitant to call the coronavirus a pandemic. However, after it's killed nearly 4,300 people and spread to 110 countries, they've left no choice but to do that. Celebrities such as Tom Hanks, as well as I believe Rita Wilson, have now contracted the coronavirus. And the NCAA has canceled March Madness, along with the MHL and
NBA.
Yeah, they have postponed their leagues. Disneyland's even closed down. So we definitely are in the midst of a pandemic. Now, something that I've known or that I've learned from working with you these last few years is that when there's a crisis, there's probably a God and a devil in the mix of it. And right, so I was hoping that you would kind of tease that out about that.
That's actually an excellent observation, Sister Janita. When Black people look at Donald Trump as president, as racist as he is, as foolish and as clumsy as he is, as much as we don't like him, we should not look at Donald Trump. We should look at God. When we look or take note of the corona pandemic and look at the map, the first map I saw, the highest concentrations of the virus was in China and in Iran. That happened to be the two geopolitical enemies of the Trump administration. A highly placed advisor to Iran's supreme leader died by the disease. China, of course, says the virus did not originate among them, and it probably did not. China says, and probably rightly so, that it was man-made by the West. Our great brother, Dr. Abdul Ali Muhammad, gave some great insight into the origin of the coronavirus. There is little doubt that it is man-made in the same tradition of Ebola. It was man-made and weaponized against African people. And HIV, which we documented, HIV was man-made, but the original HIV virus, melanated people were resistant to it. It was. So in order to weaponize HIV against African people, the scientists had to overcome the melanin resistance. So this is how you get HIV-2 and the other genotypes. I don't know if coronavirus, if African people are resistant to it. However, the current map is very curious in that regard. Europe is being devastated by corona. In fact, almost every place on the planet is being devastated, but Africa, according to the map that they're presenting, Africa is almost untouched in the pockets that exist in Africa. The very few and small pockets, they seem to be non-African people. No foreigners in Africa. Communities
is this because of the melanin?
I'm not going to say that, though. Okay. I have read that, but I've also read, I have not been able to confirm that, as we can confirm it with HIV and the original melanin resistance to the original genotype of HIV. I can't confirm that with COVID-19, but it's very curious that Africa seems to be immune to the pandemic right now. So what's my take on the bigger picture that you presented, the God and double in this? I think the Honorable Brother Minister Farrakhan, I've learned from him, God communicates in hints and in signs. And so the wise listen for God in hints and in signs. If we attribute the origin of COVID-19 and this corona pandemic, if we attribute it to wicked scientific dealings of the West, of the US, okay, China was hit. After China threw thousands of Muslims in concentration camps. In the China, Mao Zedong was very pro-Islam. Mao Zedong was a friend of the Nation of Islam. And the Chinese government took a very unfortunate turn in turning all of these Muslims, and then China gets hit with corona. Again, Allah speaks or communicates in hints and signs. The NBA just canceled its season, remarkably. Only weeks after the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan presented to the world how his grandson was barred from the NBA for no reason other than his name is Farrakhan. And once the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan put that out to the world and let the world know that the NBA took an anti-Farrakhan stance, which is what it was. And by taking an anti-Farrakhan stance, the NBA took a stance against the Messiah. And now, for the first time ever, you have to suspend your season, taking tremendous financial loss, and everybody associated, the networks, everybody is suffering because of corona. So Allah uses the devil to execute his will against those who are the target of Allah's punitive will. So I see the devil in the corona pandemic on the immediate level, but I also see Allah involved on a higher level.
And what would be that higher level?
What do you mean? What would be the high? Why would Allah
allow
a corona pandemic?
Well, yeah, because
again, when you look at the map that I see, Europe, if the maps are true, Europe is up in flames. I mean, Italy has quarantined the whole country, and the number of deaths. I don't know what Italy did to the Trump administration, but I know what Italy did to Africa. I know Italy's offense to God. I know Europe's offense to God. And so now it could be that tomorrow the map comes out and Africa is inflamed with corona. I don't know. But right now, just going on the data available right now, it's white folks. Corona. The people who are suffering for corona are the exact opposite of the people who suffer from Ebola. The same people who made corona or COVID-19 likely are the same people who made Ebola. African people in Africa suffer from Ebola. And now it could be, I don't know that it is the case. I don't know. So let me say that. But it looks like it could be the case that the West unleashed COVID-19 on the current administration's two main geopolitical enemies, Iran and China. And that's why the initial map had all of the cases concentrated in China and Iran. So Satan unleashed it on their enemies, but they are suffering the chickens coming home, the biological chickens coming home to roost. And so the target was Iran and China, but now all of Europe almost is up in flames.
Then is Allah's plan for retribution then would be punishing them through this coronavirus? And then would that then, for all of us who have suffered at the hands of white supremacy, then we would be restored through the, am I following?
Now, let me be real clear. I am not qualified to speak the will of Allah that has not been already spoken by the one who is qualified, the Honorable Brother Minister Farrakhan. I'm speculating. I'm looking at the data as it is available. And since we're talking about saying this is what it looks like to me, I am not privy to the undisclosed will of Allah. When he discloses it to the Honorable Brother Minister Farrakhan, who is the one that is the communicator of God's will today, then we can be sure. What I'm doing right now is purely speculating, looking at the data as it appears, and it can change tomorrow. Like I said, tomorrow a map can come out and Africa is totally in flames. But I don't think it is insignificant that the map as it exists right now has Europe inflamed with corona, China and Iran, and almost all of the map in Africa is unhit. And I'll close on this note. It makes me think of a Newsweek article I saw as a college student. I never forget this. The cover story was The Agony of Africa. And it had on the cover of Newsweek a emaciated African child. The cover story was about all of the various sufferings of Africa through famine, through disease, through war. And the whole article was outlined in green, black, and red. So every excerpt, they're making mock because it came at the height of the Afrocentric movement that mad at Leonard Jeffries in New York. So in the midst of the Afrocentric movement, Newsweek drops The Agony of Africa and all the suffering that Africa was experiencing, and they framed that suffering in green, black, and red. And so with the agony of Africa in mind, agony that was imposed on Africa by Europe. And now today, we're witnessing the agony of Europe, the agony of Italy, the agony of white folks in Africa is missed in this agony, if that data stands, I think is very significant.
Well, I know I'm going to be very curious to see how this evolves and continue to look for the messages, the spiritual messages in that. But let's move on to something that you are really well known for, your research. So I have read your How to Kill God, the Murder of Michael Jackson, and its message for hip hop and Black America.
Well, thank you for suffering through the 100 pages.
Yeah, no, it was definitely I didn't suffer through. So this is part of your second volume of Understanding the Assault on the Black Man. It's part of your new book that you're releasing, The Pot Plot. So my initial thoughts, I was just like, you really compiled all the research available and presented. We're going to get into the details of your article, but you presented it here. And my first initial thought was like, you know, Crime TV better watch out for Dr. Wesley. They ain't got nothing on you, man. Yeah. Investigative news, like you're here to stay. I was just blown away. And then, you know, you're the king of footnotes, and I like to check footnotes. And so I was
You're
like,
the queen of checking footnotes.
I was like, yes, his footnotes check out. Okay. So, but before we get into it, and since this is, I believe, the last chapter of the Pot Plot, let's first, since we are in season 4 and it has been a while, kind of go over what your book is about and then how people should think in relation to what we're going to go over today for the rest of the book.
So, Understanding the Assault, Volume 2, of course, it's a second volume to our first title, Understanding the Assault on the Black Man, Black Manhood, and Black Masculinity.
Yeah.
In Volume 1, of course, the focus was on the Black man, Black manhood, and Black masculinity, which, there's no redundancy there. Black man as distinct from Black masculinity, as distinct from Black manhood. They're interrelated, but they're distinct. And what we document is the architecture of the assault on all three.
Yeah.
Volume 2, our vision and focus expands beyond the Black man. Our focus is a chemical assault. The scientific assault on the Black man, the Black woman, and the Black child. So our focus in Volume 2 was the assault on all of Black America. It is most of Black life and most of the crises of Black life in America. It's not by accident. As I drive up and down 79th Street here, I observe us, and it's a very remarkable experience when you or we find ourselves or place ourselves in the hardest hit areas of Black America. Just witness us. Witness us visually. Witness how we move. Witness us mechanically. Black people have ailments that we don't even know why, and we've normalized just having ailments. Right? We've normalized it. And the harder hit the Black community, the more the profile fits that. What we document in Volume 2 in particular, in 800 pages and 2,000 footnotes, is that there's a reason for it. Mom Mom is limping. Mom has a pain in her leg and she don't know why, but she just lives with it. We live with mystery pains and ailments. We just live with it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a real, we can actually trace the source of mom's limp. We can trace the source of dad's ailment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the direct result of the weaponization of everything that black folks come in contact with. Everything has been weaponized against us. The air we breathe, the food we eat, to the music we listen to has been scientifically weaponized. And so volume 2 documents the architecture of the scientific assault on Black America. And the reason this book concludes with Michael Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
the concluding chapter is How to Kill a God, the murder of Michael Jackson, and its message for hip hop in Black America. It is because Michael Jackson, his life and his death, proves to be, they say it in literature, is a figure of speech called synecdoche, figure of speech that means the part of something can represent the whole, or the whole can represent the part.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jackson, a Black god. Michael Jackson was a god. This is true. What is a god? A god is a being of power and force. And when you hear white folks, as they did, talk of Michael Jackson as the most influential human being on the planet, that's power and force.
Mm.
So in killing Michael Jackson, they killed a god, they murdered a god. And I say Michael Jackson's life and his death is synecdoche for all of Black America.
Mm-hmm.
Because in their method of murdering Michael Jackson, they've normalized that method of murder. In the way Michael Jackson, the method used to murder that Black god, has been made trendy
Mm.
in Black life. And so in our report, we have Juice World within Michael Jackson. There's a sense in why it's not arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
We document that Michael Jackson was deliberately murdered. He didn't die by accident or by negligence. He was deliberately murdered. Well, brother Dr. Wesley, Juice World popped pills himself and collapsed in the Chicago airport there in Midway. How are you comparing the two? I think there's a real comparison.
Mm-hmm.
The ones responsible for Michael Jackson's murder, the circle of people responsible for the murder of that Black god, Michael Jackson, they happen to be the same ones that commandeered hip hop. And they happen to be the ones responsible for using hip hop to normalize in Black culture the very method of death that was used to kill Michael Jackson. You call it death by polypharmacy. Death by polypharmacy. Michael Jackson wasn't killed by propofol. Michael Jackson had a very deadly cocktail of drugs running through his veins.
Mm-hmm.
Polypharmacy, the synergy of a number of specific drugs that was used to murder Michael Jackson. Juice World died by polypharmacy. He had several drugs coursing through his veins when he collapsed at midway. What's the connection? How Juice World was murdered by the ones who commandeered hip hop. Why'd I say that? Juice World said he was in 5th grade. Juice World struggled with drug addiction that is a consequence of listening to Future. Juice World said that it was Future that turned him on to lean and Percocets and drug abuse when he was in 5th grade. Future lamented that and then took stock of how many other hundreds of thousands of young Black boys he turned on to drugs that he did not abuse. Future's most drug-soaked album, Monster. When he recorded that, he was totally sober. But he created a whole generation of young Black drug addicts. But again, where's the murder involved here?
Well, do we want to set it up to where we go from the beginning of all your connections first?
Yeah, but I want to complete this thought, and then we'll land that plane. But this is the context of the title. Message. What's the relation between Michael Jackson and Juice World? Mm-hmm. I want to make that connection. Future lamented turning on Juice World and so many other hundreds and thousands of young Black people to drugs that he did not abuse like that. And he said, or he hinted that his role as the drum major of drug addiction hip hop, that his role was contractually mandated of him through his record label, Epic. It's his record label. He was under a 7-album contract with them. So the albums that Future, the drum major of drug addiction rap, the drug-soaked music that he produced, he was under obligation to his label. And what we document is who runs the labels. Mm-hmm. The same ones who run the labels are the same ones who were around Michael Jackson and murdered Michael Jackson, literally, by individual. And so it's not as they murdered Michael Jackson through polypharmacy and mafia language. The specific hit job and a mafia contract was put out on Michael Jackson's life. We'll get to that. But the specific hit job is called a syringe job. Murder by chemical ingestion or chemical injection. That's how Michael was murdered, by a syringe job. Juice World was murdered by a syringe job himself. Yeah, he ingested the Percocets himself. He drank the lean himself, but at a more distant level. The only reason he sipped lean is because he was influenced to do so by music controlled by a conglomerate that deliberately used hip hop to normalize drug taking. They deliberately, hip hop as the vehicle for drug use in Black America. That did not happen naturally. It was the same people who were on the periphery, in the shadows of Michael Jackson's murder, and the same ones that are responsible for transitioning hip hop from an anti-drug culture to a drug abuse culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so Juice WRLD was murdered, but at a distance from the same circle of people who murdered Michael Jackson. But the only difference is in Michael Jackson's case, there was only a 1 degree or 2 degree separation between Michael Jackson and the ultimate murders, Conrad Murray and Alvin Arnold Klein being the hired chemical hitmen, but they were pawns. With Juice WRLD, the murderers are the same, but they're at further remove. They're at 3 and 4 degrees removed. So this is why the murder of Michael Jackson concludes 800 pages documenting the scientific assault on Black America, because the way Michael Jackson was targeted,
Mm-hmm.
the way he was lied upon, villainized, made broke, robbed, and then murdered, the exact same way that individual God was targeted and then murdered in such a way, is the story of Black life in America, especially Black male life in America. So by looking and seeing how Michael Jackson was handled, it throws the contours of Black life in greater relief. The Black man in particular can have a clearer understanding
Mm-hmm.
of what he experiences on various levels by understanding what happened to Michael Jackson.
I want to back up a little bit. Something that you said earlier about in the Black community, we normalize ailments. It made me think of when I used to work in hospital settings, and I'd meet patients, and they would say, high blood pressure, hypertension runs in my family, or diabetes runs in my family. We really do normalize it, because it's not that these things genetically run in our family. It's your eating habits run in your family, and through your particular eating habits and perhaps the stress loads that you have at your job is why you're experiencing these ailments.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's interesting, because you can also see that in hip hop now too. It's where people will use the legacy of drug addiction in their family as if it is, and there is some research on that, but genetically this is the reason why they're on this path, where it's more so probably your association. So if you're associating with a group of people who are pushing drugs on you, you're probably gonna do drugs. So that made me instantly think of that. And then it's interesting though, so you start off in your report though saying a quote from where Michael Jackson asks if they're going to kill the artist. So Michael Jackson starts off knowing or speculating that at some point he is going to be murdered. He thought, he mentioned
he knew, and he knew who was gonna murder him.
So you say, based off your report, that it's going to be between these 3 associations: the Jewish mafia, the gay mafia, and was it the homosexual mafia? Or
let me read to you what I'm
you.
saying. To summarize, 110 pages. There is compelling evidence that the death of Michael Jackson on June 25th, 2009 was no accident. It was not the result of negligence, but of deliberate decision making. Michael Jackson was murdered. It was not propofol that killed Michael, but a chemical cocktail, only one ingredient of which was propofol. Just as Dr. Conrad Murray, the Black doctor, just as Dr. Conrad Murray was clearly the fall guy in a much bigger conspiracy,
Mm-hmm.
so too was propofol, the fall drug of that much bigger chemical cocktail that killed Michael These charges are not, or these charges are sustained by a tremendous amount of evidence, including, most importantly, the explosive testimony of a government witness who was a high-level investigator out of the state attorney general's office, as well as the detailed revelations of a whistleblower, one involved in the plot who spilled a whole lot of beans. And this is to your question, and this is very important. If we were to, or when we titled the show, the title of this show should not be The Murder of Michael Jackson, but the title of this show should be The Vindication of Michael Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jackson was neither gay nor a child molester. Rather, he was vindictively framed by a circle of gay child molesters. And then he was murdered. Hollywood's Jewish gay mafia, with its pedophile ring, targeted Michael Jackson with a slanderous media and legal campaign, falsely charging him with their own crime, gay pedophilia. And then, after sinking Michael in tremendous debt, a rich entertainment conglomerate organized a comeback concert, which, according to the key whistleblower, was only a cover for a murder that was planned. There never was a plan to go to London and have 10, much less 50 concerts. That was a cover for the murder of Michael Jackson that was already planned, in the hijacking of his tremendously valuable asset, his Beatles catalog. The convergence of interests that is responsible for Michael Jackson's murder. It involves elements from the Italian mafia. There was a contract put out on Michael's life. We know that from Frank DeLeo, the mafia associated manager whom Michael fired. But then when he was put in a state of continuous chemical confusion, Frank DeLeo was brought back in. Frank DeLeo, before the mafia murdered him because he fell out of favor with the ones who he helped hijack Michael's estate, Frank DeLeo confessed that a mafia contract was put out on Michael Jackson, but those Italian mafia elements worked in cahoots with Jewish mafia elements, Al Malnick, Jack Gordon, LaToya's husband, the Jew mafia, and the Italian mafia elements worked with Jewish mafia elements and worked with the gay mafia elements. David Geffen. So Michael, AEG, who was responsible for that fake concert run, This Is It. And also, by the way, when Prince was killed by drugs, his concert promoter was the same AEG. There's not a black, what these details highlight, there's not a single black celebrity death that is not under suspicion now. In fact, we could say more. Let me say this. Let me back up.
Okay.
The context of not just the murder of Michael Jackson, But when we think about Prince, when we think about Whitney Houston, when we think about James Brown, go all the way back to Jimi Hendrix. The real context of all of that was given by Randy Quaid and his wife Evie. You know, who saw Independence Day? You know, the crazy dude, the alcoholic dude, that's Randy Quaid, right? Oscar nominated, great actor. His wife Evie, a Hollywood it girl. Well, a month after Michael's murder, Randy Quaid and Evie Quaid had to flee the country. They went to Canada seeking asylum, and before Canada's immigration board, Randy Quaid and Evie Quaid said they are seeking asylum in Canada because back home in the States, there is a group of what they call star whackers who sought to kill them. They said these star whackers killed Michael Jackson, and Evie Quaid and Michael Jackson shared the same doctor, Conrad Murray. Conrad Murray is the one who delivered the fatal chemical cocktail. So the Quaids had inside knowledge. They went before Canada's immigration board pleading for asylum, saying to the world that, quote, Hollywood is killing its stars. Michael Jackson was killed by the star whackers. David Carradine, Heath Ledger, and the star whackers that he describes as the gay mafia, is the Italian mafia, is the very elements that were around Michael Jackson. So that's the context. And he said the star whackers kill, Hollywood is killing its stars on a very high level money grab. They will get the star in a project in which the star is insured, and they kill the star, they whack the star to collect the insurance. And I close on this. So Michael Jackson was murdered June 25th, 2019. His murder was caused by the synergy of drugs delivered to him by Dr. Conrad Murray, AEG's employee, Dr. Arnold Klein, AEG's employee. Their drugs killed Michael June 25th, 2019. Hours later, AEG filed papers to collect the insurance on Michael's death. And the insurance policy had this specific clause, a drug abuse clause in it, that if Michael Jackson died by illicit drug use, AEG couldn't collect the nearly $1 billion for the 50 shows. However, if Michael Jackson died from non-illicit drug overdose, then AEG can collect nearly $1 million in insurance. And hours after Michael fell victim to a chemical concoction that AEG employees murdered him with, AEG filed for insurance paper. One last detail, this is the most important detail. There's a reason the murder had to happen on June 25th. because the whole jig would have been up for AEG on June 26th. What I mean, the whole point of the star whackers is to whack the star for the insurance connected with the project they're dealing with, because all of these Hollywood stars, when they're in their projects, a movie or whatever, David Carradine he said they got him for his insurance. He's doing this show over in Asia. When the first talks with AEG occurred in January between Michael Jackson and the Jew, Randy Phillips, CEO of AEG Live, and it's not immaterial that he's Jewish. When the first conversations occurred, January 2009, Michael was clean of drugs. Michael had been clean for several years. Michael was not a drug abuser. Michael had beat the first addiction that was imposed on him. Vindication of Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson is not a druggie. He was not a druggie any more than he was a child abuser. Mm-hmm. Michael Jackson was chemically assaulted the same way the black men and women on 79th Street are chemically assaulted. But in January 2019, Michael had been clean. He beat his addiction. AEG signed that contract with him. Sought insurance for him because that's the game. Lloyd's of London sent their physician to do a physical on Michael because they weren't going to insure him without a physical. They did a 5-hour physical on Michael. They took blood tests. In January 2009, Michael was in tip-top shape. He ain't have no drugs in his system. Mm-hmm. So Lloyd's of London approved the first insurance policy, but it was for 10 shows, 80 million worth 80 million euros. AEG, without Michael's consent, expanded the concert run from 10 to 50, not because they expected Michael would do 50. They never intended to step foot in London, but because the insurance policy on 50 shows then went from 80 million euros to $1.5 billion. However, with the expansion of the shows, Lloyd's of London, the insurance company, required a second physical. But by the time the second physical was to come around, AEG had already chemically assaulted Michael because the point was to have him default on the contract so they can seize his assets, which were put up as collateral. But look, they wanted AEG and the ultimate head of AEG, another Jew, Philip Anschutz, a Jewish billionaire, Philip Anschutz. The second AEG required a second physical exam in order to expand the insurance policy. Do you know when that second physical exam was scheduled to take place? June 26, 2009. And by that time, Michael Jackson had been devastated. Michael Jackson would have failed that exam. And if that exam took place and Michael failed it, the jig was up for AEG. The jig was up for the $1.5 billion clause. So on June 19th, Michael's fate was determined. June 19th, Michael's fate was determined. They determined to pull the plug on Michael. They determined that they would trigger the drug death clause. Because if Michael Jackson died by non-illicit drug abuse, then they get the insurance. But if a living Michael fails that second exam, they get nothing. So on June 19th, they decided to pull the plug, not on the show, but to pull the plug on Michael Jackson. And that's when everything was set in place for his murder on June 25th, avoiding the June 26th physical exam that he was sure to fail, and AEG would have gotten nothing. And so they killed Michael on the 25th.
Many people have denied the existence of this so-called